it.
Hey friends, slip into your suits because in this episode we're taking a deep dive into world building. Epic fantasy tomes, alternate history tales, weird westerns, superhero adventures, even a little romance. We hear our guests have written it all. Tonight they'll share their ideas for how to organize your world, work with a collaborator, satisfy reader expectations, and answer how much is too much. Welcome to The Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the mellifluous Kayleen Williams. We're two authors on a journey to learn more with you, the audience, so thank you for joining us. Tonight's guest is the dynamic duo behind Aethon Books, the hot new science fiction and fantasy publisher behind Titanborn, Contact Front, the Buried Goddess Saga, and The Edge of Valor. Rhett and Steve.
Edge of Haze.
Edge of Valor, yeah. So bring all your Edge of Valor jokes here. We'll enjoy them on Thursday night too. Welcome, by the way, to Josh Hayes, who is here, Jay Clifton Slater, Patricia Gillum, Stephanie Zerby, Bard of Today. Who else am I missing?
Let's see. We've got
Rick
a Jaime Castle impersonator, and the Rick. There are other people.
Shadow the Illustrator.
Yes, scrolling all the scrolls. Yeah. Lots of people. All the people.
Welcome to everyone. Now, we've got so much to talk about tonight, specifically world building, because that's what the fans asked for. But what you all really want to know is, what is Aethon Books doing with Nathan Fillion?
Okay, hold on. Nathan
Fillion. I'm sorry. I'm so excited. My words are just jumbling together.
We changed his name to Matt.
I think what you meant to say is what Lauren Moore really wants to know is what's happening with Nathan Fillion. And we will call him Nathan from here on out, if that's okay. Nathan will be. Nathan has a book coming out with us on October 22nd. Woo!
27th.
7th. I'm sorry. I'm so excited. My words. October 27th. Untitled Vijay Ratna. That is the most fun name to say in science fiction. I want to tell a quick story. When we signed Yuda, I had no idea how to pronounce his name.
I still don't.
I know you don't. I hung out with Josh Hayes on the phone for about 20 minutes one night, saying Untitled Vijay Ratna over and over and over again until he finally said, "You got it right." Yuda's going to be on the show on November 30th, and we're trying to get Nathan Fillion to be on, but I'm going to say the chances of that are pretty slim, but we're going to try.
So you're saying I shouldn't just accidentally be like, "Oh, this wasn't Thursday. I'm sorry."
No, it's. I don't know that it's going to happen, but Nathan did narration for Yuda's book. Book's called Salvage Crew, and Nathan plays an AI. So the story is told from the first-person perspective of an artificial intelligence, and I won't blow everything that Yuda's going to come on to talk about, but Yuda co-wrote the book with an AI.
Wow. That one, nice.
Yeah, and Yuda actually programmed the source code for the artificial intelligence that did it. So everything is very novel. Everything is very organic, and like it is Yuda's thing, right? And I mean, he's a data scientist, and like this is the first book that we know of that anyone can confirm that was ever co-written with an AI.
The first one narrated by Nathan Fillion.
First one narrated by Nathan.
For sure, we know that.
And so one of the, it's cool. Like he actually, he had the AI like read portions of his book and then dictate to him what the characters should be and what various things within the book should be. And like, I believe he actually took some portions of the book directly from the AI.
I think he procedurally generated all the environments, like similar to how a video game would do it for his book and stuff like that. And it's funny, which is always good for Nathan.
Man,
how'd you pick him? Because when he plays characters, he brings out the human side, like the mistakes, the humor, the genuine feeling. And to play an AI,
because it's like a snarky AI.
A snarky man.
If you listen to the sample on SoundCloud, this character was made
Yeah.
for Nathan Fillion. Fantastic. So we're pretty stoked. It's exciting. And I'll tell you this, without any other words, coming out, there's more to come. Like Nathan Fillion may be the biggest to come, but there's more to come. We have other projects that you're going to go, holy crap, how'd that happen?
That's super exciting. Well, Nathan is huge because Firefly fans, we miss him. We miss him. It's been years since he's come out back into science fiction, and he's done Castle, which is great. He's done Rookie, which is great. But the science fiction world wants him back, and you guys made it happen. So thank you for doing that.
Woo! Woo! Let's not forget Lou Diamond Phillips' book comes out October 20th. So this is the month of celebs, of Athon celebs, and we're really excited about the things that are happening here. So it's gonna be good.
Any other releases you can tell us about?
Scott Moon has a military sci-fi series on October 27th as well.
With Peter Berkrot. And Peter Berkrot is Hollywood too, man. He played in Caddyshack back in the 80s. You
see his butt in Caddyshack. Yeah, right in the camera.
And Peter might not be Nathan Fillion in science fiction name, but Peter's got a phenomenal voice and did an amazing job for Scott Moon, who of course is one of the hosts of KSM. So are you telling us that this actor mooned us in Caddyshack and is going to moon us again? The second moon.
That's good.
Love it. I didn't even think of that.
I didn't think about that either. That's good.
Interesting.
Get mooned again.
And you guys yourselves, you've been writing, and those are getting ready to come out in the next couple months too.
Finally some stuff, yeah.
We're
not here and there.
We both really stocked up, man. You see that like most of these books behind me, I don't think are released yet.
Oh.
And those are not even all of them. I've got others, and Rhett's got, 3, 4, 5 books or something like that he's written and not released. Is that right?
I think 3. I think just 3, but
3.
Holding on to the goods, man. Why you do that?
Well,
why you play the hardball?
Because we're waiting for the right narrator, like Nathan Fillion.
Oh, there you go.
And you just came out with an alternate history. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Right.
Yeah, so technically it came out in audio in like February. So we just released it ebook and print. It's the Lunar Missile Crisis. It was the first book we wrote together probably like 3 years ago, and we waited for the right deal, but essentially it's set during the Cold War in the 60s, and the first manned spaceflight from Russia accidentally crashes into aliens, and it sets the planet on a totally different alternate history, with the U.S. and the USSR competing for the affection and technology of aliens. So that's a setting for the whole book. It's set around two brothers who make some mistakes and almost cause doomsday, essentially.
Doom.
We had a reviewer recently that has a blog dedicated specifically to Cold War alternate history. And he said, when he saw that there was yet another Cold War alternate history book, he said he didn't know what to expect. He said that this was the only that he's read, the only Cold War alternate history that is that the history is affected by the development of aliens in there. So that was pretty cool to hear that, somebody that does this, like that's all he reviews. We came up with something that I guess no one else had done. So that's pretty.
And there's like 2 reviews on his site. So our book and one other book.
Oh, come on. I didn't know that. That ruined it.
No, I'm just kidding. I haven't even seen that one.
Oh, thank God.
I just can't imagine.
Well, he's trying to troll you in your amazing.
I can't imagine there's too much Cold War.
Apparently, no, that's what he said in his review. He said there's a ton of it. So I don't know. We'll find out. Anyway.
So tonight's topic is world building, but we can start with Lunar Missile Crisis. So with Lunar Missile Crisis, you've got Earth world, Earth history, but you also have the aliens. You got this alternative version that you kind of are putting together. How did you guys figure out how history and the fiction can blend? And then how did you kind of organize it and keep it straight?
I think there were big things we wanted to hit in this story. it's hard to say stuff without spoiling it because there are certain things in history that happen. But stuff like the Iron Curtain becoming the Dead Curtain was a big thing. So there were a few, obviously the Cuban Missile Crisis, a similar type situation. There were a few big beats, and I think a lot of the little details sort of filled in as we went. And, you know, a lot of it was mixing something popular in the 60s with now alien technology where there's holograms and stuff like that. But it's definitely tough. I would say this book and the sequel we're working on right now, it's probably the toughest thing either of us have written because neither of us were alive in that time.
Right.
So every paragraph we sort of have to Google and be like, is that accurate? Because people will notice. So yeah, it's an interesting one for sure because we're balancing creating a new alien culture and a new world's culture because now there's aliens in it mixed with being accurate to the 60s.
That's kind of cool that you're taking that mentality of what we know is and kind of flipping it on its head.
Yeah.
You're also working together. So two people, you're not in the same state, you're not in the same office. So how do you do that? What was your workflow, or how'd you work together on the same manuscript?
Most of what we write together, we have the benefit of having our own individual characters that we work on within the stories. I've said it a million times on this show, but like we each touch 100% of the words, but we're not the primary writer on 100% of the words. So like in Luna, Rhett mainly wrote Connor and I mainly wrote Kyle. And then we would switch those, you know, I'd write Kyle and then give him Kyle. He'd write Connor, give me Connor. And one of the things that understanding that we just have is like, if one person doesn't like something, we pretty much change it. I mean, if I'm being really honest, like I'm the more submissive writer. I trust Rhett in storytelling, and he never questions me when I change the wording of stuff. So that's kind of how our flow is. Like he handles story, I handle technicality of writing, and we don't argue about those points, but we still have some arguments about like where the stories are going. Buried Goddess was the same. Like he wrote mostly Torsten, I wrote mostly with Whitney, and then of course as new characters came on, we had our own. As a matter of fact, like we fought over Marave. I wrote Marave for book 4, and then you wrote Marave for book,
I think for book 5,
right?
And then we both did half and half for book 6.
Yeah, I totally wanted to write Marave for book 5, and one day he texted me. He's like, "I started Marave." I'm like, "You asshole! I wanted that." So
as from what you were saying before, you guys already seem to have like the big picture beats. Like, you know, you have the A and the D and, you know, an X over here, and then you're filling in those you're filling in those pieces. I think that's interesting how you're taking whole POVs to yourself and then interweaving it.
I mean, I think it helps that we're basically communicating about what we're writing all day. Like if some of the characters are funny, so if there's a good joke, we'll kind of go back and forth on perfecting it, that sort of stuff. So it's not like we're writing on an island, which probably, like I would say, like a lot of people team up and write, and it's to produce faster. And I think what we've found is we produce awesome books together because we like push each other to get it perfect. But it's not happening faster. Yeah, it's, if anything, it might be longer because we are going back and forth to get it perfect. Especially Luna. I mean, when I say we worked on it for 3 years, we'd put it down and pick it back up.
We rewrote that at least twice.
I think when it first was done, it was like 100,000 words, and the final version is like 140. So a lot of parts of the story and the world really, really grew to where it is right now, for sure.
When you said at the beginning, man, it's like it's the hardest thing we've ever written, and I mean, we really kind of started writing the sequel over the last couple of weeks, and like the whole time, our response is, "I did this. I don't know if it's good, but I did it," and that's kind of like you just got to get the words down. I think we've talked about that on KSM a lot. A lot of times, you just need to get the words down and then decide if they're good afterwards. But that's kind of the process that we're taking, because it's just a really damn hard series to write. It's so much real world versus fake real world, and it's just hard to get. It's hard to get.
All right, we're gonna get a little more into the minutia of how exactly you guys work out world building. From 2 different desks, 2 different computers. But first, just kind of in general, you guys are editors and publishers. You've published by now over 250 books.
We have.
So you
surprised me.
So you see a lot of manuscripts come across your desk. So from the 2 of you, what do you guys look for good world building, or what tells you that the world needs to be developed more, or maybe they've gone too far into the weeds of like so much detail? What do you guys look for as editors when a manuscript comes across your desk as far as world building goes?
I mean, that's tough. Obviously, the first thing, you could do so much with the world building just in the cover letter, and just having a normal cover letter that explains the world a little bit is good. For me, I think world building, we always, if we see an info dump that's huge, that's a big turnoff. I think both of us for world building really prefer when it's slowly like unveiled through the eyes or the perspective of a certain character. I think that's the way we like to see it. But it's something, we have so many different genres. And someone might send us a fantasy book where the world itself isn't very unique or crazy in any way, but the way the characters interact through it is interesting. And I mean, I think Buried Goddess Saga, we didn't try to push the world to anything that it hasn't been done before as far as the fantasy setting. I mean, it was more so the way the characters interact throughout the setting that we thought was unique. So I think there's a lot to that. I think for us, we're definitely character focused more than some really, really crazy, unique world. And yeah, like you can go too far. You can go too little. I think you just need to be honest with the world. It has to work through the perspective of the character. And if you're forcing something, we're pretty good at being able to tell if someone's forcing something just to make the story work.
Rick, you're such a jerk. Rick Partlow is such a jerk. Unique is an absolute modifier. You can't be very unique or a little. He is right, but like when I see, so we get a lot of submissions, okay, as Athon. So like we have slush readers,
hundreds.
Yeah, I mean hundreds a month,
probably, yeah.
So we have a slush reader that kind of goes through. She knows. Well, actually, I guess there's more than, I don't know.
We have one main slush reader. We have a pretty big team.
And she knows what we like and what we publish, and then lets us know what we need to take a deeper look at. So, if 200 submissions come in a month, Rhett and I probably only take a look at 5 or 6 of them. And if I'm looking at it, within the first page or 2, I know whether or not I want to sign it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that comes down to world building. But here's the thing, world building doesn't sell books. Right? I mean, when it really comes down to it, we're not talking about a traditional publisher where we get like 1 or 2 books a year that we're going to really push hard. Like, we're not looking for something that breaks the mold. We're not looking for very unique. What we're looking for is a well-written book that people are going to enjoy reading. And if I'm not interested in the first 2 pages, I'm looking at it as a reader more than I am as a publisher. If I'm interested to know where this is going. So what I look for is a character that makes sense and a world that makes sense. And if one of those is lacking a little bit, sometimes we can go, this is really well written and the character's cool. The world doesn't really work. Then we email the person and we say, here's what we think. Do you think that this, and this can change? Or I didn't read a ton of it. Could you tell us, does this eventually come into play? And a lot of times they go, yeah, it does at chapter 8. And you go, well, let's move that up to chapter 1 because like we want to see that up front.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing is sometimes people do have, Rick, I won't say unique, but they have like the heart of their world building. Like in every story, if you're going to try to put out a science fiction or fantasy world, there's something a little bit different about it that if you wait too long to tell people what sets it apart, you've already lost them. If that's a great character and told in the first person, someone you've never heard before, I mean, that's it. That's your hook. But if it's a part of the world and you're waiting till chapter 8, that's going to be a problem. And I think me and Steve both are fine with slow opens and slowly building up the world. I'm a big fan of cold opens in books where the first chapter or so isn't even the main story. It's kind of just bringing you into the character and the world, and you're not going to learn too much, and you're going to be slowly introduced to it. But yeah, I mean, you need to hook people in that first or second chapter with your cool idea for the world or with your cool character. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. So yeah, and that's a big thing. Don't wait too long to tell people what's special about this book, and don't overdo it. Like, it could be subtle, and then you slowly build on that subtle idea. You don't want to hit people with a 2-page info dump in the beginning, but definitely don't make them wait to find out what's special.
So pacing a lot of times can, at least as far as what you get, can impact how that world is being built, how the readers are getting to know and interacting with these characters. If you take too long, it's just, and they put it down. You do too much at once and they're just like, good Lord, they have nothing to grasp onto. So you kind of have to find, that really strong thread, and then all the other pieces, how that characters interacts with it. Because I wanted to comment what you were saying earlier, Rhett. As the world unfolds through those characters, right? So if character A is in, over here, how are they going to know what's happening way over in Yondersville with the info dump that's 2 pages long when we're here? So that, I just want to say that.
No, I think pacing is huge. We're both pretty big on focusing on pacing, and it's not the only way to tell story through the character's eyes, but I think that's a great way to build your world. Like, if I'm going to read an info dump, if it's told through a perspective and there's an opinion on everything about the world, you could do that first person or close third person. Then that all of a sudden that info dump isn't an info dump; it's a look inside the character's mind. So typically, if I'm going to do like a science fiction and start building the world, I won't build a certain part of it until the character sees something that relates to it. And with first person especially, I think that's the only way, because if you're walking through the world as a person, you're not randomly thinking about the politics of a country far away. But then if you see something that reminds you of that, then you'll start maybe thinking about that. So that's sort of the idea for my first person exposition, is as the character sees it, you begin to understand it. And you sort of avoid long info dumps that way, especially ones that aren't completely relevant to that moment at that exact time.
Well, so much of the beauty of experiencing it as the character sees it is that you don't always have to be honest.
Yes.
In the Buried Goddess saga, we have something called the God War, the God Feud. And the God Feud is explained 3 different times in the series, and all 3 times are from different perspectives of different character perspectives, and they are so vastly different that by the end of the series, you go, I don't know what the God Feud was.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
and that's okay.
It's what I did with Titan with the 2 first persons, is they're basically, they all see the same things. So for 2 books, they see the same stuff, and they see it completely differently. And, someone who's reading and not looking at it, they might say like, oh, he wasn't paying attention. He kind of rewrote the book. Mm-hmm. But with first person, you have that chance to play with your world, because, again, everything is perspective anyway. So building it through the character's eyes kind of makes it more of an honest world.
So
I'm sorry, Lauren. Go ahead.
When you use the term world building, you're kind of thinking like a reader. You're thinking like someone who's consuming the book. Where
yes.
Before they've even picked up the book, they know nothing about this world. So how does the author introduce that world to the reader? And you're saying start with a hook, start with something really intriguing, and then don't tell the reader about the world until the character sees it and experiences it for themselves. So their understanding of the world is built through the character as they read the book.
You are that character. And again, my writing style is very movie-like because I tend to watch movies and TV shows more than I read. So that's sort of most of my inspiration. But you think about it in a movie, there's no cutaway to explain to you what's going on far away. You're experiencing it right alongside the character. Movies that put that prologue that explain the whole world to you, typically people shit on that because it's almost cheating. Sometimes it's really necessary because you have time limits. But that's sort of what you're doing, is you're a camera and you're right with the character, and the reader is only able to see what they see. And in a book, you get the benefit of being able to hear what they think too.
Yeah, it reminds me of the John Wick movies, like watching those, you know very little when you start, and then every little piece of information you get is just from that one little scene that John's in.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of how first-person writing is at a certain point.
I would argue that third person is the same.
Yeah,
Close
I think
third
so.
person is the same, right? Like we've come to a point in writing. First of all, to touch on something you said, Lauren, I think every writer should write like they are a reader. As you're writing your story, you need to be your own reader, and you need to be able to go, do I even need this information yet? Is this information pertinent to where we are in the story right now? Or can it wait until later? Because sometimes you drop this chunk of crap in the middle of an action scene, and all of a sudden you've lost your reader, and you're feeding them information that could so much more easily come later on. So as a writer, like, we're always going, as a reader, would I enjoy this or would I not? The John Wick series is an amazing example of that first person, because really John Wick is a first person story, right? The only movie that I can think of that's any more first person was that Bad Luck Charlie, or what the hell was that called? Hardcore Henry. You remember that one that was literally in first person?
Oh, the shooting, it was like a shooting game movie. I didn't see that, but
it was tremendous. I mean, it was amazing. But yeah, that I think that we should always write as readers.
Memento is one I think of with first person.
I didn't see that.
Memento?
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Chris Nolan, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
like 10 years ago, the guy has really short-term memory, and it goes backwards in time, and you get one scene at a time.
And I like what you're saying, Steve, with the like, you have this action sequence, and then there's this giant, it's like it's a break. It's like you have this tension building, and all of a sudden, by the way, I call them oh by the ways. And I'm just like, okay, well, oh by the way, you could have it here or up there, or just not at all, because this is from a completely different character perspective that literally holds nothing to the story anywhere. So yeah, definitely you gotta take that critical look, because at that point, that's where a reader can get pulled out of the story, because they're no longer in that moment, and now they're just like somewhere elseville and getting slapped with all the info. So.
Well, I'm reminded of a scene that we have in Luna Missile Crisis, where Connor is running from the mafia. It's at the very beginning of the book. Connor is he's a con man. He's a grifter, and he is trying to sell fake alien technology to the mob, and he gets caught doing it, right? And he's running away.
Go wrong.
Yeah, he's running away, and he finally gets away, and he sees the city for the first time. This is the first time that the reader sees the city. So in that first chapter, like, it's Connor in a storage unit on a dock getting beaten up by the mob, and then he's running, and he's still on the docks, and it's just a bunch of cargo containers, and then all of a sudden he's in the city, and there's buses driving by, and there's silent cars driving by. It's the 60s. They're not gas powered. They have solar panels all over their roofs, and now we have just created the world that they live in is affected by the alien technology that came 2 years prior, and we didn't have to tell anybody that. Connor experienced it.
That was probably the most beautiful example you could give of a seamless world building effort. You have this huge world, and you've told it to me with my Rifter series. Like, stop it, you're doing too much all at once. where there's aliens and there's the US and there's Russia and there's all the things, and it's like he's on a dock and he's doing shit and he's running, and then a glimpse of where this dock is, and then it just keeps building as those characters get there. So
yeah, I mean, we went like 100 pages without showing the aliens, which was not easy. but we kind of went with that sort of classic movie feel too. So
that's like Jaws, right? You don't see the shark, and that kind of builds it.
Definitely like a monster movie trope where you don't see it, and that was sort of how we wanted it to be. And then you see them and like they're scary but intelligent. So we were kind of rolling with that monster movie trope.
Do you think the reader might get bored with the pacing of the world unfolding being too slow? Like if you sacrifice some of that for the sake of plot?
I don't think they did. I mean, based on reviews.
Yeah. I think it's hard with that book because really it's not like it's a genre mash of 30 different genres. It's not something where you could look at a market and kind of know what sells with it. It's a really strange sort of book. So it's a little difficult to say. I don't think the reader of that type of book probably would get bored of seeing how aliens might affect this version of the world. But yeah, in certain genres, for sure, you can't go as long as we did without some action sequences or anything like that. I mean, we have plenty, but it goes from like a very human story where there's only two humans to like a global alien crisis, and it takes a while. It's a long book too. I mean, it's a 15-hour audiobook. So
but the story was about humanity.
Yeah.
It's not about the Volbathi. It's about the humans and how the Volbathi affected the humans.
Yeah.
What's that, Kayleen?
I said I'm so glad you said that word because I'm going to super insert myself with a segue into today's spotlight. Volbathi is on The Luna Missile Crisis, a first contact sci-fi adventure by Rhett C. Bruno and Jaime Castle. Aliens, agents, and espionage abound in this Cold War era alternate history adventure. A wild ride. Dennis E. Taylor, best-selling author of We Are Legion, We Are Bob. The year is 1961. The Cold War is in full swing and the space race is on. Russia aims to send humanity to space. But what if space comes to humanity instead? Soviet Yuri
Gagarin.
All right.
Soviet
Yuri Gagarin historic first manned spaceflight is disrupted when an alien mothership jumps into orbit, causing a cosmic car crash that defies all odds. Everything changes. The US and USSR must quickly put aside their differences in exchange for the Earth's help in the rebuilding of their mothership. The mysterious aliens known as the Volbathi offer promises of technology beyond humanity's wildest dreams. All the while, the world asks whether the Volbathi are saviors or conquerors. When an alien tech counterfeiter's mistake sets off a chain reaction, the fragile peace is threatened. Connor McCoy didn't mean to upset Earth's new intergalactic neighbors. He only wanted to make some cash. Now, Connor is the only person who can stop the doomsday clock from striking midnight. That is if his estranged brother, an agent in the new Department of Alien Relations, doesn't get to him first. If you're a fan of District 9, The Expanse, Destiny's Crucible, or Andy Weir's Artemis, you'll love this first contact alternate history romp across Earth and space of doom. Because we must have doom.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Beautiful.
Awesome. And as you could see by the if you likes and how different they all are.
It's awesome though.
We matched up a lot of things.
All right, so we've talked a bit about world building from the reader side, the consumer side. What about from the author side, before you even start writing the book and you're just kind of like planning and conceptualizing? How important is it for your world to be original? What do you think? What's your take on that as editors and publishers?
I don't think there's a such thing as original anymore.
Okay.
So go ahead.
I think you could have an original take on an old idea, basically, but the base of your idea is probably not going to be something that hasn't been done before at this point.
I think for us, being that we are both character writers, our first question is always going to be, how does the character fit into this world? And then the world gets built around that character.
Yeah.
And like we said before, the world actually sort of gets built by the character. You guys, I mean, we're pantsers. Rhett and I are both pantsers. We don't do a lot of outlining. And so writing Into the Dark, exploration, discovery writing is exactly that. Like, the characters tell us what we need in the books. Dresden Files. Am I?
Yep. And we're waiting to fix all the things, and now he's back in here. We go back to you.
The Dresden Files author Jim Butcher had something. He said something one time that I loved. He figures out how Dresden kills or beats the villain. Like, he figures out how he does it to determine what the villain is.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, like, he didn't go, the villain needs to be a werewolf. He actually went, how do I beat the villain? Oh, he's got to be a werewolf.
Wow.
So his character, Jim Butcher, doesn't write the world. Harry Dresden sort of does.
So he unties the knot before he ties it.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense, because when I'm reading the book and like a knotty situation's coming up, I'm going, I have no idea how he's going to get out of this one.
Yep.
And that's how he made it happen.
Which is like a mystery writer thing. I think they usually start from the end and then work backwards to make it so you can't really predict what's going to happen.
But I think we're avoiding the question a little, and I apologize. We're kind of dancing around that question. When it comes to world building, I think we have one or two talks when we're writing a series. You know, most recently we developed the Weird Western, starting with the novella Dead Acre, and that's going to be an Audible original that comes out on Thanksgiving with Roger Clark narrating, who is the voice of Arthur Morgan of Red Dead Redemption 2. So one of the things that we did when we started that is we went, okay, so this is a weird Western. What makes it weird? I read a lot of different genres, and I've recently read a handful of weird Westerns where there's really no weird to it. There's just like one or two little things that don't matter to the story that are inserted just to keep it from being a full-on Western. And when Rhett and I were writing this, we asked ourselves, okay, so what makes it weird? And we're like, are there vampires? Are there werewolves? We're like, yes, all of it, everything.
Yeah.
Let's do all the things.
And then we had to ask the question, you know, what is the weird aspect of our main character? And for us, he was an outlaw who died and was raised from the dead by heaven, basically. And he now serves the White Throne, and angels are his handlers. And the whole story is revolving around him being a hand of God, or a black badge, who has to take down really Lucifer and the gates of hell. And so we had to build everything around that. And Rhett asked the question, well, what makes hell different? And I'm like, what do you mean? And I mean, this wasn't a real conversation, but this was the gist of it. What do you mean? Like, is it the Judeo-Christian hell? And he's like, let's make hell really cold. Like, no fire. It's cold. It's ice. And we're like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? Like, how do we spin all of that to make it work in our story?
Yeah, so I think what happens, because you can't really be fully original, is you take different pieces and piece it together into something that really maybe hasn't been seen before. And with that novella, I think that's a good example. We basically wrote something, tore it down, and rewrote it based on the same outline, and it wound up totally different because we focused more on the powers through the character and making him a little not overpowered and stuff like that. Because again, it's so easy to have a guy risen by heaven and then he's super overpowered and no one could ever stop him because he's immortal. So you have to figure out what his limitations are, what the villain's limitations are, and stuff like that. So that a lot comes with rules. I'm big on trying to have restrictions in the worlds and the powers that are in them. It's like, I love Harry Potter. The one thing I hate about it is that anytime there's a situation, there's a spell that is exactly for that situation, no matter what. So there's no rules to the magic like you'd see in King Killer Chronicles or some other fantasy where there's clear limitations or there's a give and a take. So was our big focus on creating that for him, like what makes him not invincible.
Yeah,
so he has like no powers. Like he's got one power that we've explored at this point, and we've so far not decided, because we don't know if we're going to make it a series yet. We're going to see how it does as an Audible original and go from there. But like the only power he has is something called divining. And for the sake of the story and not doing any spoilers yet, like we'll leave that alone. But it's not very powerful.
It's almost sort of like why did you guys give me this power?
Like seriously,
kind of thing. Yeah, which also adds some humor to it, obviously, but it also like it limits his ability to just be an unstoppable force for good, which is not an interesting thing to read for us. We want him to be pretty flawed in basically every aspect.
Well, it sounds a little like Harry Dresden, like in a Western setting, because Harry Dresden also has a pretty like flawed background, and he's gotten into trouble and he's gotten into some violence, and now he wants to be a detective. But your guy, he's starting out small with his powers. So what you're saying with the world is that if you start with this recognizable world and then you twist it in some kind of unique, I'm not saying the word unique, interesting, intriguing way, that can be fun for the readers. And that might be more of what readers out there are looking for, because often when you're on Amazon and you're looking for your next read, you're thinking about a book that you read maybe years ago, maybe just last week, and you want another one like that. You're not looking for something completely new. You're looking for that feeling again. So I guess a risk with having a completely new world, and I'm not saying you can't do it or don't do it. I'm not saying anything like that. But one risk that you're taking is that the readership might not be there because they've never read a book like that before. It hasn't been written yet.
Yeah,
well, I completely agree. One of the things, every story I write, that's always been one of the things in my back of my mind. What is the most recognizable thing the most people can grasp onto? And how can I set that home and then, basically turn it on its head? I have failed more times than I have succeeded, but I keep trying.
Real quick, you said that it's Harry Dresden. So we actually call the Black Bad series The Witcher meets Harry Dresden in the Wild West. Now, I will say this, like to touch on what you just said, Luna Missile Crisis, I could say without any doubt in my mind is the best thing either of us has had anything to do with in the history of our writing careers. Rhett, is that fair?
I would definitely agree.
Right? It has no market. It's got no market. It's
like Armada. It's like Armada.
I guarantee you, if most sci-fi readers read it, they'll go, "Oh, that was fantastic." But it's alternate history, which is hard to sell. It's pulpy 60s history, which is hard to sell. And there's a stigma or there's an expectation when you talk about alien invasion stuff that it doesn't touch on. So to answer the question, like unique is not always good because it's hard to market.
Yeah, and I think you see that. I mean, it's what we see as publishers. The first thing I look at when we get a submission is what's the subgenre and what are they comparing it to? Because again, a lot like The Witcher meets Dresden Files, there's a reason we're saying that. Even if it doesn't fit them exactly, those are like the base molds that we're adding originality to around. But you need something like that, especially in the digital market, to have a chance at selling. Otherwise, you're sort of playing poker. I mean, you're playing a card game, and you're hoping you get lucky, and the book goes viral. But people can't find the book if they're not, like you said, they're searching for something that they like based on stuff that they've already read that they liked. So you need to hit those markets in order for them to find it. And I think it's a big difference between indie and traditional publishing is more so that they're both looking for different things that sell, whether it's unique or not. There's just different genres that sell in print versus that sell exclusively on Kindle Unlimited and such. I think Audible's a little different because there is it's newer, so it's a little bit more Wild West. Different things can sell, but still, like marketability is a huge part of this industry. And like going back to asking about what we look for in a submission, sadly, that is probably the first thing.
If the word unique is in the pitch, I hate to say it, but it's like a turnoff, because immediately Rhett and I are going, we can't sell unique.
Or they didn't do the research to find out what it's like, which can be a problem. Because again, like being completely unique in 2020 is, I mean, I'm sure there's a rare book here and there that does it, but it's not going to be often. And you know, a lot of times we'll get a submission. I'll say, you know, this kind of sounds like this and this, and they're like, oh, it is like that. And I was like, well, then, like, why'd you pitch it as the first book of its kind, sort of thing? Like, we want to know what it's like. And I know in traditional publishing, a big danger when you're submitting is saying, well, my book is like Star Wars mixed with Star Trek. And that's almost like shooting too high. They want you to do a little bit more research than that to find out what it's like that's sold at a normal level, but still sold well. But, you know, basically any science fiction can compare itself back down to Star Wars. So that becomes kind of the game you play, is how niche into the subgenre am I going to pitch this thing?
So I want to touch on just really quick as a comment, because I've seen over the years a lot of people, they get hung up on that. They get hung up on that comparison. They don't know, like, at what point does my story mesh with all these other stories? And I'm actually going to kind of go back to your the dock scene, right? So it starts off very, very human. At the water, we're on a dock, you know, it's the 60s. You know, what kind of story has the feel of the 60s, you know, with a what is he? Bad guy. He's not a bad guy, but he's, you know,
like a grifter.
Grifter. Thank you. There's the word. You know, with a grifter type of character. Boom, that's it. You don't have to go any deeper. Right? You know, you have your era, you have a grifter character, what other story kind of fits in there? And, you know, sometimes that's as deep as you need to go. You know, you don't have to hit all the angles. You just need to hit the strongest one that you can find that has the strongest variable of relativity. And
like, we have several different, if you like District 9 and you like, what was the other one?
You know, you have 4 of them. There's District 9, The Expanse, Destiny's Crucible, and Andy Weir's Artemis.
I mean, they're so all over the place.
They're so different, but you know, and Moon.
They all fit.
Yeah, Moon Colony, aliens, political science fiction, alternate history. When you don't have a book that hits the sub-market, like a military sci-fi exactly, that's sort of the game you're playing, is trying to grab people from all different markets and get them to look, because it is going to be harder to get exposure in that sort of field. And
it's also important, you don't have to hit just one or compare to just one. Just like they said, all 4 of those are just like here, there, and everywhere, and that's okay.
But remember, Luna is really damn hard to sell, right? So like, we didn't do a good thing.
So if you're willing to put in all the work, all the headache, and all the try, and the research, and the whatnots, you know, play your cards the way you're willing to, you know.
Yes, and again, we're very focused on audio, so that's a very like a totally different market than selling in Kindle Limited as well. So on audio, Luna did really well for a super niche alternate history book. It's a completely different market, which is why we went Audible Original with it in the first place, because that was where we thought it would fit with the accents and the different historical characters and stuff.
So when does it come out on?
Do you think getting the Audible Original is part of why it sold so well, or is that separate from everything else?
I don't honestly think it affected anything. You know, it just let us focus more on audio. Probably might have sold better if everything came out at the same time, but you never really know. I think from the start, probably a year before the deal was done, we were like, we want Ray Porter for this. This is his sort of book. Dennis E. Taylor read it, who's Ray's biggest client, basically. So that was our goal, is we wanted him however we could get him. We've been doing a lot of deals with Audible, so we went Audible Studios, Audible Originals is there. It's the same people, so we kind of went for a super unique audio product.
Sorry, Kayleen, I cut you off.
Oh no, I was just gonna quietly ask when it comes out on paperback, because I am still a paperback reader.
It is.
It's on hardcover.
It is.
Yeah, there's a really weird situation going that I can't figure out, where Amazon is saying that the hardcover is still on pre-order, and I've tried to figure out why. I don't know. If you want a copy, let me know. I'll figure it out. But Amazon's really kind of.
Well, I'm just saying, because all of that sounds delicious to me. I guess I'm just a weird reader. So
print is really rough right now with COVID, so that's probably a big reason why. And the delays on ordering a print book are like a month.
But I also want to touch on
Papa Chuck asks everyone know how to world build now.
Is a lot of what you're saying comes down to the purpose of what you want to reach. What are you looking for the launch of this book? What are the expectations that you want to reach with that book, and how can you get yourself to reach them? You know, with the Lunar Missile Crisis, you guys were looking for, you definitely want strong audio. So that's how you tailored a lot of your marketing. It's how you tailored, you know, what you were attacking first. You know, am I making any sense?
Well,
no, I think that's honestly a really important point, because you have to look at genre and sort of aim for what's realistic. Genre, if it's a series, how long of a series, how fast are you releasing it? I mean, there's different ways to sell different things, and if you just try to sell a different type of book in the same way, it probably won't work. And you know, part of what we do at Athon is learn how to sell those different things, because you can't do it the same way. We can't sell romance, you know, because we have no idea how.
By the way, we learned that, Lauren. We can't sell romance.
Yeah, we tried because we were curious. Like,
I mean, with those beards, how can you not?
Doesn't work the same way. It
So world building, you know, I know we're kind of running out of time, but the subject is world building, so I kind of want to get to this. World building is world building, no matter how much world building there is. It's kind of like how much wood could a woodchuck chuck?
I was just thinking woodchuck.
I think sometimes we get caught up in like world building is only world building if it's Brandon Sanderson and it's like this super deep, like there's ash in the world and like we don't know why there's ash in the world until the end of the book, or like we don't, you know, like there's this intense magic system that exists. But my argument would be that world building is whatever you decide your world needs to be, and it could be this much or it could be this much. And like I think about Buried Goddess because like it's 1,000,000 words, it's 6 books long, it's a massive epic tale, and like there's not a ton of world building. There's the gods that exist, there's the different nations that exist, there's a political thing going on, but like we're not super focused on the magic system. We're not super focused on like well, I don't know. The world building that exists in Buried Goddess Saga is interactions between characters and how the races interact with one another and how this race is being held captive by this race, and how does this race see what this race is doing versus this race versus, you know, it's not like Brandon Sanderson world building, but it's still world building.
Yeah, I mean, I think most simply put, world building is literally anything your character experiences, especially in science fiction fantasy. It's not our world. Right. So the smallest thing is a detail that's unique to their world, their specific world. And that's where the uniqueness comes in, is what is in this character's world and how do they view it. And I think you could do a ton of world building just with that, just with seeing how one character views something versus another, instead of focusing on this huge in-depth political or magic system. And adding that stuff in too is great, but there's definitely levels you could do it if you only really want to focus on the characters in your book versus making it this huge, like Game of Thrones. He kept writing more and more world building until he didn't know where to go with it, because eventually, like, a world can only be so complex. Imagine someone on our world knowing literally everything about every culture on the planet. They would get crossed up and have a hard time remembering things. But the book,
I live here and I get crossed up and confused.
Exactly.
That's kind of my question, and where I was going with this is, if you're an author who's trying to get all your ideas together, like, how do you do that? You guys have something like 5 different races, you've got different nations, you've got histories, and those histories affect the characters and plot lines, and it's all, you've got magic, it's all there. So how do you organize it?
I think take notes for sure. We don't. We tend to go all off memory.
Fancy.
With some notes
Super pencil.
But definitely be smarter and take notes as you go. I know one thing that's good is Steve loves to re-listen to our audiobooks to hear the narrator's performance. So he'll go through and actually take notes. And it's almost like cheating in school. I could look at them and be like, oh, that's what we did. Because it is like Luna Missile Crisis is so complex. As we were starting to plot out book 2, he was listening through and we had ideas in there that we were like, oh, we had totally changed that. Because sometimes the world building does get that complex, but sometimes you don't need to put every idea into a book. Kind of distill it down to what the best ones are and what affects the characters the most. Because if it's not affecting the characters at all or any of the people in the book, then who cares,
Rhett's really good at telling me that's cool, we don't need it.
I'm sensing some animosity there.
No, not at all. I mean, I need that because, like, I'll have an idea that is cool, but he'll tell me that's a different book. I'm like, okay, that's a different book. The beauty with like fantasy is that you could do whatever you want to do, as long as it works within the confines of your creation. Which, remember, you have a core for your world building, and everything has to flow through that core. And as long as that works, you could literally do whatever you want. It really is the same thing with science fiction. It's the same way with speculative fiction all around. I think there's, hard sci-fi follows the rule one big lie. You are allowed one big lie to make your world work. Luna Missile Crisis. There's one big lie. The aliens showed up when Yuri Gagarin took off into space. Every single thing we wrote in 145,000 words and now in the sequel has to be filtered through how did the aliens affect this.
Yeah, and the good thing about keeping your world building close to character is Connor McCoy doesn't know how that alien technology works. So you don't need to explain it. Because again, like me and Steve aren't physicists, so we're not going to be writing hard science fiction. That's a genre.
It's hard.
That a lot of people really like. It's not a genre that we think we could write competently, so we're kind of trying to write suspension of disbelief, but using that one big lie method and writing it through a character. I don't know how a car is put together, so why, when a first-person character sees a ship, does he know anything beyond maybe the type of engine it's running on?
Well, we asked Brian Mansur is one of our authors. He's a good friend of ours. He's in the chat. When we have science-y type stuff, we go, Brian, would you read this for us and just tell us if it makes any sense? And then he goes, well, this ship is too big to handle this kind of engine, and this engine does. And we're like, well, friggin' A, just tell us how to fix it. And he does, and we move on.
Yeah, you've got to have that science person in your back pocket because oh my god, I've written a couple hard sci-fis. It's just I'm not gonna lie.
Habachuk's also in the audience, and he says world building for Old Man in the Sea was an old dude, a boat, an ocean, and a big fish. Corey Gilliam says, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, world building is explaining the box, then figuring out how the characters sit inside and how you can bring them out of it.
Why are we doing this show? These guys got better answers than we do.
They know.
Where were you on my epic post? All right. Any other last minute questions, things you wanted to touch on, things you're dying to say?
I want to know if the Gillums are related, Patricia and Corey. Are you guys you happen to be in the same chat here? If a character is eating breakfast, readers don't care how the futuristic toaster works. Amen.
I totally agree. That's something you tend to have to edit out of science fiction books is too much detail on the mundane.
I remember editing, or maybe Rhett edited, and God, I apologize if you're the author that did this. I'm just going to do it anyway. I remember hearing he took his thumb and his forefinger and placed them together and raised the other three fingers in the OK sign. That could have been reduced to he made the OK sign. And
exactly.
A lot of times we get that with all the sciencey stuff where a reader like me is going, God, I don't care how long the shaft was. Ooh, that's what she said. But for real, like I don't know any of that stuff, so I don't try to put it in our books at all.
Okay, so one of the questions we wanted to answer was how much is too much? And I guess the answer I'm hearing is if it's getting in the way of the story, right? If it's not serving the story, then
too many details.
Serving the story, the character, or it's just like mundane, it doesn't matter, then you probably don't need it.
Yeah, please don't tell us how your characters choose food.
Unless that's a trait.
Yeah, I mean,
that
True. Just don't overdo it.
Play is more important. Like maybe later on he's wearing a mask or something, and the person recognizes the chewing pattern. Like that's important.
See, okay. Well, see, now look what Steve's doing. He's now turning a mundane thing into an important thing for a specific purpose.
Right.
So mundane could be important, but you need to know why.
Yeah. Perfect.
Alrighty. Thank you guys for coming on, hanging out with us, sharing your world building expertise, and giving a little bit of what everyone out there wants to know is how to make Aethon happy to read my book, because everyone wants to make Aethon happy.
We'll read anything. Doesn't mean we'll like it. We'll read anything though.
But we want to make you happy. The whole thing. How to make Aethon happy.
How to make Aethon happy. Sell a lot of books.
Yeah.
There you go. Don't be original. Own your character.
Listen, please don't walk. If we're talking from Aethon perspective, don't be scared to present your original, quote, original idea. Just be prepared that if it's a this mashup and this mashup, if it's this, and this all smashed together, one of our answers is going to be, I don't have a clue how to market that to make your book successful. It doesn't matter how good the book is. If we don't get readers for the book, it's not going to be successful. And it doesn't always have to do with our ability or your ability. It's just Amazon. That's just how it works.
But if we love it, sometimes we will, like Make Me No Grave. There's no market for that book, but we made it sell. So sometimes you can do it, but it's going to take a lot more effort. So
well, and I'll say KSM played a huge role in how well Make Me No Grave did, because I was co-hosting with you guys at the time, and everyone on the show was reading it. And we talked about it a lot, and everybody got interested in Make Me No Grave. And I think that it was one of those situations where once you read it, you go, holy crap, this is the book I didn't know I wanted to read.
Yeah, it's going to take way more work up front to get that thing in front of people because the market doesn't exist. You have to make it.
All right. So at the back end, focus on your writing. Write the word. Find your characters. Find your world. Build that world around your character's perspective. You don't just need one POV. Some genres can hold 20 POVs if you really want to go that route. But, make sure it's solid. Know what you're writing and why you're writing it. And go. All right. So with that, because my brain is literally dying, I had like 2 hours of sleep last night. The zombie right now. Thank you, Rhett. Thank you, Steve. And I'm just going to rub your head. Rub. Oh, wait. We'll come back up here. Yay! There we go. Rub your head. Because that's what we do on here. All right, everyone in the live chat, thank you so much for joining us, for giving us all of your Coffee of Valor. That is happening. That is a thing. I did hear from the SOB that It's happening. He's getting first servings. And yeah, so I don't know what we're doing. What are we doing next week? I have no idea. I probably should check up on that more. Do we know? Do we even know? Do we not know? I don't know what we're doing, but come be here Thursday and Monday live. Talk about all the reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium because Kayleen's brain is dying. Good night, guys.
Night.
Night.